and they can hear us kind of bantering.
Oh yeah, there's two people.
Yeah, and if you click on it, you
So
can see who's
fun.
there.
Oh my God, Tari.
Oh
my God, Maite. Ah, this is amazing.
These are the punctual people. These are the people who always showed up to practice right on time. Not as
It's true. Jenny, do you want us to start on the dot? I know folks are coming in, but do you have a preference? I should have asked.
No, I'll give people a few minutes, and
okay,
then
cool.
I'll kick it off.
Okay, I'm gonna mute myself because I don't want everyone to hear my thoughts.
Lori Gartrell. Kat, you just finishing up the week over there? How are you doing?
I am. I don't even know where the week goes. I'm always like, okay, I got 5 days, and then Friday comes around, and it's 6 p.m., and I was like, oh, I completely blasted past all of those deadlines. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, well, we can start. I just wanted to briefly thank everybody who was on the panel last week, Cassie and Rachel and Uyghur and JT. I thought the interactive nature of it was really fun, seeing your slides, Cass, and having all the polling, Rachel. And there was so much going on the first one that I actually watched it again later, and there's some amazing content in there for people's colleagues and families and teams. So I recommend checking out the recording if you didn't have a chance to watch it. Today's session is going to be a little bit different in terms of format. We're not going to have any slides or any polling. Instead, it is going to be a gallery view discussion of the panel that's up here now. We really encourage you to use the Q&A feature in the bottom of your screen. Jarbo in particular really wants to integrate anybody in the audience who has questions or thoughts into the discussion. So we might be doing it a little bit differently than we did it last time in terms of if people have questions, we might get to them sooner and bring them up kind of on the panel to participate. And then in response to some people who wanted me to not end the session so quickly, I will keep the meeting room open for a bit after we finish today. So if people want to hang out, grab another drink, that would be fun. Okay. So let's get started. I wanted to take a few minutes to reintroduce, for those who know her, and Nicole Jarbo. She graduated in 2008, 1 year after me. And Jarbo's been doing some really interesting things since she left Cal. It's kind of crazy. You've been out for 12 years, and that means I've been out for 13 years, so that's a long time. And when Jarbo and I were catching up, getting ready for today, her story is one where she really spent there's two chunks of what she's done since she's left Cal. The first 6 years or so, she was very focused on education. She got her master's at Berkeley, and then she went and moved to New Orleans and did Teach for America for 2 years, and then stayed another year and worked at a charter school, KIPP school, teaching first grade. And then a little bit thereafter decided to, pivot and moved to Washington, D.C. and work at an organization called Philanthropy Roundtable, where she was the director of K-12 education. And some of Jarbo's stories from that year are definitely something I want to hear more about. It sounds like she worked for the director of the whole organization, and they would fly all around the country and talk to ultra high net worth individuals about where their philanthropy was going in terms of education. So she kind of combined this first 6 years of working in education with thinking about where it intersects with philanthropy. A few years later, Jarbo made a decision to move back to the Bay Area, where she founded a Good Bets company that is kind of a boutique fundraising firm. So where she continues to combine her passion for education and her kind of inquisitiveness around philanthropy and where dollars are being given. So it's been a real pleasure catching up with Jarbo the last few weeks and thinking about her ideas for questions to ask the panelists today. So no more of my time. So Jarbo, why don't you get started?
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everyone. I would just want to jump into it because like Jenny mentioned, We want this to be interactive, and y'all will probably ask better, smarter, more thoughtful questions than me, and that's okay, which is why I want to give you the opportunity to do that. So first of all, thanks everybody. Jenny, thank you for that nice intro. I forgot that I did anything between like, I don't know, Cal and like this morning. So I appreciate that. And panelists, you're not gonna have an intro quite as nice. So just don't expect it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. But first, I wanna do a little bit of framing. So we're here to talk about Black Lives Matter and share reflections on identity, racial equity, and other things that are in the title. And before we do that, I just wanna recognize that this has been a really heavy time for a lot of people, particularly people who are in the Black community, particularly people who are in the LGBTQ community, and so many other people, right? Then you have COVID happening, and so 2020 has just been a fucking shit show. And one of the things that I hope is hopeful for people is that we're taking a more critical eye and lens, hopefully, at racial issues in this country in a way that we never have before. And that's really exciting for me. So when Jenny mentioned I'd been involved in philanthropy, a lot of my work is helping organizations that are doing this work on the ground figure out how they can get funding, figure out how they can keep their organization sustainable. And so I'm just really proud to see this moment happen in my lifetime where there's a mass renewed consciousness around it. So super excited to be here and super excited to have all of our esteemed panelists who, like I said, are not gonna get really nice intros. I'm just gonna read their name and year and title. But I'm gonna let them introduce themselves because we're elevating voices. So let's go ahead and jump into it now. A couple of rules. So I would love for you all to use the chat. Make sure you change your settings. So there's a blue drop down right above where you type in to all panelists and attendees. So that means that everyone can read what you're writing. Maite has been asking the panelists a lot about picking her nose. And so I want to make sure that goes to everyone. So everyone has an equal chance to embarrass themselves. All right, other than that, this is a sensitive topic. And I just want to encourage everyone to be present as much as you can and to really engage. I mean, it's no surprise that our community at Cal Soccer is primarily full of white women. Like, let's not pretend that doesn't exist. And so I think this is a really great opportunity to have folks share their stories and their perspectives about what's happening. And we really want this to be a space where everyone can feel free to engage. That being said, everyone's ideas, experiences, and perspectives are their own. And we just want to open a space up and a forum up for everyone to share. All right, so let's jump into it. So first we have Kim Armstead. Woo! Since I can't hear any of y'all, you can like type yay or exclamation points. Show some excitement here because this is nerve-wracking. We got Kim Armstead, graduated in 2000, nothing behind it. And she is currently a police officer at the Oakland Police Department. We got Anna Key Jessman, graduated in 2007. She is a consultant at Georgetown Center for Wellbeing in School Environments. We have Courtney Hooker Heldreth, who graduated in 2008 with me. And she's a senior user experience researcher at Google. And it's worth noting, she also got her PhD in psychology from UCLA, studying racial discrimination, attitudes. I think that's right, Hooker? And so I'm really excited for her to teach all the people things that are in books. We have Nkechi Kanu, who graduated in 2009, and she is a lawyer at Kroll and Mooring in DC, which if you don't know, is a super bougie, fancy government contracts law firm. Don't shake your head at me. Don't shake your head at me. But she is an amazing, amazing attorney. And so she'll be talking about her experience and what she's been doing at Kroll and Mooring and just in her own individual life around some of these issues. All right, we're in it now. We're in it now. Oh my God. All right, so let's go ahead and start. I introduced everyone just very briefly by their title, but I want to give you all the floor to talk about what you actually do and what does your day-to-day look like. I talked about a lot of different experiences, and so everyone's going to be coming at this from a different angle, so I'd love to hear more. So Hooker, why don't you start? What do you do and what does your everyday look like?
Sure, thanks, Jarbo. So yeah, I'm a social psychologist, as Jarbo mentioned. I'm a social scientist. I went to grad school to study the thing that hurt me the most in my life, which was racism and how it affects mental and physical health. So when I finished graduating from Cal, I volunteered at UCLA working on a project looking at low-income couples in LA and how experiences of prejudice and racism basically contribute to something we call allostatic load. So increases sort of physiological reactivity. And then through that, I've always wanted to figure out how to take all of these insights and apply it to something that feels real in the real world. So I worked at Facebook for 3 years on growth. I worked with small businesses and specifically looking at women in India and figuring out how do we overcome the structural patriarchal barriers and have them have a business on Facebook. And now at Google, I do a lot of culturally embedded research to understand the risk and opportunities of artificial intelligence for the next billion users or people in the developing world. Most of my work is in sub-Saharan Africa and in India. And I also, as a part of my job, I do a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion work at Google. So I lead inclusive culture initiatives. I work closely with leadership to figure out how we build more inclusive pipelines, improve our hiring practices to bring more people into the fold.
Awesome. Thank you, Courtney. I hope you get paid for that DEI work, but I'm not going to go there right.
That's coming.
Anna, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, you're gonna make me follow that. Hooker, that is unbelievable. It's so cool to hear about that work. Hi everyone. Thank you so much to Jenny and Jarbo for having me. I'm gonna go ahead and just start with the elephant in the room, which is that I'm not Black. But I know it's really, that one always surprises people. But I will say that I am so deeply humbled to be a part of this group of incredible people, and just to talk a little bit about my work and kind of what it does. So I work at Georgetown in the Center for Wellbeing in School Environments. So we operate out of the Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Division of the medical school, and basically we do wraparound mental health services in schools. But I focus specifically on teachers, and so I do trauma-focused teacher training and consulting and coaching. So I work with teachers when their classrooms have students who have experienced trauma and ways to teach that actually restore some of the impacts of trauma. And I also do teacher therapy on site. So we have a theory that giving teachers counseling on site during the school day will help keep them in the game, which we know is better for kids. And so we're trying to do that. It's kind of a pilot we're doing here in DC. And I think, like, you know, in the past couple years, our research has shown us that the experience of racism on the brain is really similar to any other impact of acute trauma on the brain. So it really just kind of breaks down the pathways between your amygdala and your frontal lobe, which is kind of where you're able to organize information. And so, you know, we see racism as trauma. And so we try to teach teachers strategies that they can use to create anti-racist classrooms. And to help their kids heal in the process of learning. And it's just been like an unbelievable experience to be a part of. I love the work, and I'm just really grateful to be a part of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. Yes, and Anna is white. And there was a very specific reason that we wanted to bring someone who did not identify as Black on the panel, just because we wanted to model what a conversation like this can look like and what contributing, you know, to these efforts for equity can look like, no matter what identity you have. So thanks, Anna. Kim, let's jump to you. You got the social work connection.
Sure. My name is Kim Armstead, formerly Brown. I graduated from Cal in 2000, as stated earlier, so it's been a while. But after Cal, I actually dove into casework. I was a legal casework under the Alameda County District Attorney's Office in the Child Support Division, and did that for about 10 years. I found the work really interesting and loved what I did. During that time, I also ended up getting my broker's license in real estate and selling houses in the East Bay. But I had always had a knack for law enforcement. I don't know if some remember that attended Cal when I was there, but Natty Stuhlmiller and I, we went to a citizens academy at the Berkeley PD. It was I believe, my sophomore year, and we would go down after practice. It was, I think, an 8-week course. We didn't know how we were going to get there, and certainly didn't know how we were going to get home, but we sure did make our ways. And through that class, I realized law enforcement was something I really wanted to be a part of. For whatever reason, the timing just was never right. But in 2014, I believe Oakland was really heavily recruiting for police officers. So at that time, it was a pivotal moment in my life, and I kind of felt like now or never. So I went for it with the support of my husband, and just, you know, my only regret was not having done it sooner. What I do, I've been an officer now for 4 years, and I work out in East Oakland, where it's predominantly a Black and underserved community. It's also a violent community or area, probably the most violent in the city. So I'm on a squad that's comprised of, it's a specialized unit comprised of 7 officers and 1 sergeant. And we do a ton of different work. Honestly, we're like a utility squad. We wear a lot of different hats and help the department in a lot of different ways. We work violent crimes to include shootings, homicides, home invasions, armed robberies. We conduct a lot of surveillance operations, search warrants. As a matter of fact, this week was a good week for us. We actually arrested 3 homicide suspects, both from 2 different shootings. So that was good. But then we also do a lot of work with the community. We're tasked with solving community-based and oriented problems. And my partner and I specifically, we actually do a lot of work with the youth of Oakland. We put on a lot of events where, you know, the kids of Oakland are able to kind of, you know, have a different perspective of what they may see in the community each day, day in and day out. We do reading with a cop, Easter egg hunts and basket giveaways, backpack giveaways. Last Halloween, for the first time, we did a trunk or treat where more than 500 children attended. We also do an annual event where it's a holiday dinner giveaway with council member Larry Reed. And then we also, during Christmas, do Christmas tree and toy donations for families who are underserved and may not be able to provide that on their own. So every day is different. You never know what you're going to get at the beginning of each shift.
Awesome, thank you. And Ketch, take us home.
Sure, thanks, Jarbo, and thanks to Jenny and Jarbo for organizing this event for us to have an open dialogue. So my name is Nkechi Kanu, graduated in 2009. A couple years later, I moved to Washington, D.C. to go to law school at Georgetown, and then found myself at the firm that I'm at now, Kroll and Mooring, where I am a government contracts attorney, but I do not represent the government. I represent the entities that contract with the federal, state, and local government to provide, you know, supplies, products, whatever it may be. I also represent, you know, entities that provide services to individuals that are covered through Medicare and Medicaid. So like a skilled nursing facility, if somebody comes in, I represent the entities that then have to file, you know, claims reimbursement back to the government to get paid. Specifically, I represent those contractors when the government alleges that they have engaged in some sort of misconduct or fraudulent behavior. That's definitely not why I went to law school. So very far from, I went to law school to become a public defender. Not sure how I ended up where I am today, but that's a story for another time. I have a pretty robust pro bono practice, and it started primarily in the immigration space. So I did a lot of asylum cases and cancellation of removal cases in immigration court. About, I think, a year or 2 ago, maybe 3 years now, I sort of shifted focus and started, you know, getting more into racial justice, police reform, police abuse cases. And my first one was, you know, related to the Baltimore Police Department and the Baltimore City. We found through the Baltimore ACLU, we represented an individual who was a victim of police brutality, who brought a suit against the city. And after she, tried to move forward with her lawsuit for about 2 years, she entered into a settlement agreement with the city. That agreement had a clause which essentially prevents any victim of police abuse who settles with the city from speaking about the facts of their case. If they do speak about the facts of their case, their settlement, is taken from them. After she settled, she got into an exchange on an online forum. I think something like the Baltimore Sun had written a piece about essentially all of the recent cases that the Baltimore City, the Baltimore Police Department had settled. Over the last 10 years or so, millions of dollars have been paid out. A lot of people did not know about it because of these clauses which prevented plaintiffs from speaking about their case. So after this expose was posted on the Baltimore Sun, our client noticed, one of her friends told her, like, hey, did you know that you're on the front page of the Baltimore Sun? She did not know. She went to the page, she scrolled to the bottom, and she saw a lot of people speaking about her case. She added a comment saying, please don't speak ill about me. X, Y, and Z happened. The city found that she violated the clause and so took all of her money. She, reached out to the Baltimore ACLU. ACLU reached out to my firm, and we brought a case on behalf of her and a local media outlet, saying that such clauses violate the First Amendment, the right of the individual plaintiff as a willing speaker, and on behalf of the press that should be able to access such information because it is, matters of, grave public concern. This case was precedential because all over the nation, we have cities and police departments that use such clauses. And when, this case went up to the Fourth Circuit, and just, a couple months ago, we had a favorable decision finding that such clauses were unconstitutional. We'll see how that sort of trickles down. And obviously, given the current climate that we're in, it's very important for the facts to be out there. And I'm just looking forward to sort of shifting my practice and really my career to something that's, more meaningful. So.
Oh, thanks, Catch. This became a career fair panel. All of a sudden. Amazing. Okay. This is actually a good moment to remind you all that Jenny and I talked a lot about y'all using the Q&A function. So if you go down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can see these two little boxes that look like they're talking. You can put your questions in there. I can see them. I can ask them. If we need more context or clarification, then we'll unmute you. But obviously, as you can see, the panel is full of talented people with diverse experiences. So y'all should be able to ask your community whatever questions you have. So, but use that thing. All right. Dang, my questions are so lame now. Shoot. All right, let's do a quick one. One word, considering everything that's happened over the past few months, and I'm not just talking about the social unrest or COVID, but just how our lives have transitioned, some of us. I'd be very curious to hear, in one word, how are you feeling right now? And Catch, let's go ahead and start with you.
Wow, one word.
Yeah, you used a lot of words last time, so.
I did. And Matt, I like to talk. Okay, I would say hopeful.
Beautiful. Courtney.
I would say tired.
Same. Kim, how are you feeling?
I'm going to go with my third choice since the first two have been taken. But I'll say inspired.
Nice.
Inspired.
Anna?
Yeah, so I think mine is a sound, and it's
Fair. And Jenny, just because you're up here, I should include you. How are you feeling in one word?
Yeah, it's too many words, and you put me on the spot. I'm not on this panel.
Okay, that's fair. If you don't want to participate, just say.
I will say, Jarbs, that people are listening to you and popping some pretty good questions in the Q&A if you want Leslie or Katie. It seems like people want to hear from you, Kim, a bit more about what defund the police means to you.
Okay.
And your thoughts on recent.
Can I stop that for a second?
Yeah.
Because that's going really far, really quick. But I want to, and I appreciate that. I do want to spend a little bit of time building a little bit more context about how you all are spending time learning in this moment or reflecting in this moment. So not all of us have to answer this, but I'm very curious to hear from a couple of you. What are you reading right now? What are you watching? What's inspiring you? What's teaching you in this moment? So anyone can kind of jump into this.
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of start this. For me, you know, I've been studying this for 11 years, and you don't need to study this to learn about this. I think all of the people of color, we've lived these experiences. We have the language to describe what's happening. This isn't new news. It's just now that we have an 8-minute video of it happening, it's certainly more in our face. So it's more of processing and coming to terms with that. But for me, one of the things that have been alarming, both in a good and bad way, is that many people in my network have reached out and have asked me, what should I do? What should I read? And it's all with such great intention. And so there are many lists and so many resources. I think at this point, anti-racist education resources are very prevalent, and it's hard to figure out which ones to start with. And for me, I always go back to like the very strong academic literature. So I have been reading a lot of critical race theory. I've been reading a lot of, Just Mercy with Brian Stevenson. If you're ever interested in learning about systematic, like racial systemic injustice in the criminal justice system, that's a really fantastic book to read. And also just a lot of social psychology. I've been reading a lot of social dominance theory from Jim Sidanius that talks about, racism and power hierarchies. Highly recommended. Also, Claude Steele does a lot of really great work on stereotype threat. And so I've been really diving deeply into that. And one of my favorite researchers, her name is Arlene Geronimus. She does a lot of really fantastic stuff on racism as a trauma. I was really happy to hear Anna talk about that, because honestly, you guys, like, that's a new concept. Like, we all knew that racism was traumatic, but for a really long time, we haven't had the science to back it. And people like David Williams from Harvard, who's in African-American studies, and Arlene Geronimus actually studied this very, very comprehensively and has showed that, controlling for all other variables, poverty, education, history of depression, whatever that might be, Black individuals experience more physiological distress because they're just in their Black bodies. And over time, health deteriorates. It's the weathering hypothesis. So highly recommend that if anybody wants to seek out that information, do it. And also, this is just like another kind of call to action. Being part of such a wonderful network, like growing up in a suburb in LA, most of my friends are white. And so I am some people's only Black and brown friend. I'm sure many people on the panel also have this experience. And so I was sought out a lot when everything happened, but I was also processing a lot. So just be sure to, like, as much as you want to learn, just be sure to give your Black friends and colleagues space, because they're also fielding in a lot of requests in addition to the trauma that's happened in the community. And so, a lot of it is, use those resources, get to a baseline, and then engage in those conversations. I would really recommend that.
Thanks, Hooker. One more on this. Anna, you have 3 children. I don't know how much reading and resource gathering are you doing, but I'd be curious with some of the work you're doing at Georgetown, is there any resource that has surprised you or that has just stuck with you throughout this time?
Yeah, so Hooker actually referenced a couple of them. I'm actually like kicking myself that I never had Hooker like read over my papers in college. That would have been super helpful. Just amazing to download her brain right now. But Brian Stevenson has always been just like a massive inspiration to me. I mean, I think that all white people right now should be reading How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram Kennedy. And I also, a friend of mine that I used to teach with, DeRay McKesson, is an incredible activist. I really recommend his book, and also just kind of looking into his work. But to be completely honest, Debbie, like I think right now, as a white person experiencing this, it's like really time to just listen. And of everything I've read and of everything I've learned and everything I've researched, my most impactful experience in the last few months has been sitting on my neighbors' porches and listening to their experiences. And it's been just like transformational, I think. And for me to be able to hear what it's been like to be Black in America, and also for me to share that with my kids. I've sat on my neighbors' porches with my children and had them listen. And I also just think it is really important to shut up a little bit right now and listen. So as much as there's so much incredible academia out there, I think, the resources that Courtney shared with us, we should all be diving into. I also think that now is the time to come together and speak to people who have had different experiences and listen to people who have had different experiences with a different lens, not one where you're waiting for your time to talk, but actually deeply listening for the first time, potentially ever.
Thanks, Anna. I mean, that's really good feedback. So I won't ask you any more questions since you're white. I want to shift gears actually, because I know folks want to ask questions. This one is for you, Kim. And then I'd love to hear your perspective as well. But what are you sort of taking from this moment, especially being in the work that you're in? Is there anything that you're spending a lot of time reflecting on? Is there something that just stays top of mind for you in this moment?
Sure. I mean, obviously, we're treading in unprecedented times. In past months, the injustices we've seen and experienced and these injustices nationwide, clearly demonstrate a legitimate call for our justice system to be reexamined. And so that's why I feel, inspired or hopeful. History is being made. The only positive or silver lining, even with the deaths of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and countless others, is the fact that this type of conversation is starting to be had. I'm optimistic that from this, moving forward, we'll actually, start breaking down some of the racist ways and, past views and references and be able to move forward. I think it's taken this to do it, unfortunately.
Thank you. And I'm going to circle back to you because I know everyone wants to know what your perspective on some of this is as somebody who's part of the Oakland Police Department. So y'all have to wait till the end. Just calm down. Ketch, I want to go to you. What are you taking from this moment right now?
Well, I think for me, it's been interesting because obviously I'm Black, just kidding. But most of my life, I experienced, a ton of implicit bias over racism, experienced it all. And I don't know if it was the right way to handle it, but I never really gave myself time to process it. If something happened, I was like, okay, like that sucked, but I am going to move right along because I don't really have time to feel bad for myself or, I need to still succeed. And in order to do so, I just have to push this way down. And so I haven't, really thought about any of those experiences or that trauma that I experienced. And I just kept telling myself that I'm fine, I'm thriving, I'm doing it. But in reality, once, I think even starting with the Ahmaud Arbery footage and then George Floyd and hearing about all of these other, murders, and then the sort of the discussion that followed with people recognizing that racism is just so prevalent and that it manifests in so many different ways. It was almost as if whatever dam that I had up that was holding all of those things was broken. And I was just like overcome some days with just feeling and processing all of those things that happened. And it took, weeks for me to be able to, not just burst into tears. Like I would be on calls with clients and someone would say something and I would remember something and be like, I have to go. Just 1 second, like, I'm gonna go on mute, just to like collect myself. And I think, to Hooker's point, this, the trauma that I experienced, I hadn't dealt with it. And through this moment, I think that I've given myself the space to do so. And I think it's really important for, Black and brown people to take the time. If you're, sad or you're crying, it doesn't make you weak. You need to address those things that happened and grow from it. So that's, I think, the one thing that's been personally impactful to me during this moment.
Thank you for sharing that. This is not about me, but I will say briefly that the experience that you just shared, that really resonates with me, because I think there's this sort of survival mode that you have to be in, especially anyone who's connected with Cal Soccer, regardless of what your racial identity is. It's like you keep moving, you keep trying to figure out how to thrive. Just like keep going, keep going, keep going. And we don't have a lot of parameters or opportunities for ourselves to process, to grieve our own pain, to move forward. And so I appreciate you saying that. And I think a lot of people would look at you and say, well, Ketchy works at this baller ass corporate-ish law firm and does all this amazing stuff. And she just drinks rosé and eats popcorn and looks perfect and her life is together. But that is not necessarily how you might feel, right? So I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that resonates with a lot of people in and out of this moment. All right, we're gonna shift gears a little bit because this is heavy. And I wanna talk about what's bringing us some joy right now. Don't jump at once, everybody. But I'm really curious, like what is joyful? And it doesn't have to be in the context in which we're talking, but I want to hear what's bringing y'all some sunshine and some light. And so, Hooker, I'd love if you'd share a little bit first.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I'm just sort of processing what Ketchy said, because it's exactly what happened to me. And I had to really kind of reflect on my own behavior throughout my life and how I put up so many walls and had this defensiveness because people have been always so suspicious of me. I've been followed around in stores. I've been pulled over for going 5 miles per hour and my car strip searched. I've seen my dad get literally abused by the police in front of me. And I just pushed all of that aside and I channeled that into soccer and I channeled that into things. And so the whole kind of processing what happened is just like so real. And I appreciate you, Ketchy, for bringing that up. On the flip side, the things that are making me happy, I think in this moment, and it is tied to kind of this movement, is I've seen people inspect systems that have contributed to systemic racism and oppression in a way that I haven't seen before. So being at Google, at a large tech conglomerate, we have this problem with basically like recruiting homogeneous networks, right? We recruit people who go to the top schools, and most of those people, all of our leadership positions are occupied by white men. And we have a pipeline problem. We can't figure out how to bring people from different racial groups into the fold. And there's been a lot of red tape around trying to get people to come to these companies. And what I've seen is, a reflection on that, but also an opportunity to really dismantle those systems and to really kind of figure out, okay, this has sort of been what we've always done, but is this what we should be doing? And how do we, if we really want to make this more than just cosmetic and more than just lip service, what do we need to actually change? So the efforts around, you know, diversity and inclusion, I think for me have been a shining light, because just in you know, it sucks that it had to be a moment, right? It shouldn't have to be a moment that creates that change. But it was a significant catalyst to having people think differently about these topics. And so for me, that's just been really, really where I've been investing a lot of emotional energy, and also lending my expertise, trying to figure out, okay, what does it mean to create an inclusive culture? How do we actually use like science to make sure that we're building these pipelines in a meaningful way? So it's been nice to lend that expertise to that work.
Thanks, Court. We'll stick with that question, and then we'll open up to all of the questions in the Q&A. So Anna, what's bringing you joy? And then right after that, Kim, you can jump in with what's bringing you joy, right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, not to be like the cliche answer, but like my kids, of course. You know, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm gonna get a vaccine and check myself into a hotel for a week by myself as soon as I can. But you know, they are, they're just joyful, right? Kids are joyful right now. And I think there's so much hope in watching them and in creating opportunities for them to be better at this than we were. That makes me really hopeful, and it brings me joy. And Jarvi, like, this is gonna sound cheeseball, but you bring me joy. I'm really proud of you and everything you're doing. It's amazing to watch. So that's my cheeseball answer for the moment.
Back up. Kim?
Yeah, like Anna, I have to agree. My family, spending time with my family, working out. I also, and may sound weird, but I love going to work. I love doing what I do. I work besides and amongst some of the best officers in the country, without question. I also love the community I serve. Nearly every day, there's a community member that genuinely thanks me for my service, and even is persistent in buying me a cup of coffee or even sometimes lunch to show their gratitude. And so, you know, I think it's important that people know that despite all the violence in Oakland, especially the east side of Oakland, the violence is being committed by a very small portion of criminals. It's a very small percentage that are responsible for the crime that's happening over and over and over again. There's a lot of great people in the community, and it may sound crazy, but I love serving my community and going to work.
Awesome. I accidentally told someone they could answer live, but I actually don't want them to. So I'm gonna jump to some questions.
Wait, Jarbs, I have two things that I have to say about what's.
Oh, did I not say? Did I not ask you? Oh, my bad.
But I feel like it needs to be said. So I don't know if you have seen Legendary on HBO, but it is a voguing ballroom dancing competition show, and it is some of the best television I have seen in a while. I think it might have just finished. But if you are looking for some joy, I definitely recommend that. I also recommend RuPaul's Drag Race, because that is always so to watch. And then on a slightly more serious note, I will say going to and participating in the protests brought me a lot of joy to see the outpouring of support, and all people from all colors, all ages, all walks of life, just going out and making their voices heard. I've been to a bunch of protests over the last 8 or so years with my husband, who is Caucasian and like very white. Like he sticks out, and people would in previous protests, like people would be confused, like why he was like, what are you doing here? I think you're at the wrong cookout. But these, the last protest, it was just beautiful to see, all Americans, all walks of life coming together out in the community. So just to add that.
Thank you, Ketch. I can attest to, here in background, I can attest to this. Ketchy's husband is very white. believe his name is Cole Bockenfeld from Arkansas. I had to say that before this was over. All right, so
I have not changed my last name, nor will I ever.
you do you. I think a lot of people want to know, just if we're being honest, Kim, how are you thinking about this? How are you making sense of the social unrest, particularly the critiques of police and specifically, obviously, police brutality? You alluded to some of this before, but I want to give you the stage and ask you, someone who's in this work, who is Black, like, how are you feeling at this moment? How are you making sense of what's happening?
You know, overall, I feel like I'm coping fairly well. I mean, there's a lot going on. It can be exhausting at times, especially with the protests, you know, the height of the protests, day in and day out. It was draining, emotionally, physically. There were times, you know, again, during the height, there was a 2-week period there following the murder of George Floyd, where I worked 12 days straight, a minimum of 14 hours a day. Sometimes the shifts were as many as 22 hours. And that can be taxing, like I said, both physically and emotionally, especially, you know, being on the front line, dealing with protesters that are legit in your face, screaming, yelling, angry, and rightfully so. I get that, you know, and I'm all for peaceful protests, but the profanity, the vulgar comments, some of the most vulgar I've ever heard in my life, day after day, hour after hour, that really begins to wear on you. Wishing ill will towards your family, throwing rocks and bottles and projectiles, you know, and it's really even labeling me as a sellout, you know, because I'm Black, you know, and wearing a uniform. So that was difficult. People blindly and ignorantly claiming I didn't care about what happened to George Floyd couldn't have been farther from the truth. I feel like I'm here as a police officer representing us, and this is a big part of, you know, my contribution in racial equity, and how I can help bridge that gap between, you know, my community and, you know, racism or even what's going on in the police force. I understand that there are bad apples in law enforcement, no doubt. There's certain professions, though, you can't afford to have any bad apples. Anytime you pick up an apple, you're gonna always pause or caution. And so one thing is, the good apples always have to recognize that the bad apples are there and attacking their integrity, dignity, and the profession that we all love. I'm honored to wear a uniform in the community that I lived in for 20 years. And every day, officers leave their home, their families and loved ones, you know, and are willing to lose their life for people that they don't even know, and oftentimes for people that don't even like them. So, you know, through all that, there's definitely ups and downs and challenging times. But again, I'm optimistic that change will be made. And moving forward, I think our conversation really needs to focus on the next steps and what to do and what true accountability really looks like.
Thank you. There's so much more to ask. Jenny, is it okay if we go a little bit longer than scheduled? Because I want to make sure we get to some of these questions. Kim, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned your contribution, and I want to hear from other folks, because for all of y'all listening, I did ask the panelists to prepare a specific question, and this was really about their personal contribution in the fight for racial equity. And, you know, we're using that as an umbrella term today to really talk about what's been happening over the past several months and what's been happening for centuries before that. And so I'd be curious to hear from folks, what is your contribution? And we'll go ahead and start with Anna.
Darby, keep putting me in first. Yeah, I'm just honestly, I'm just like taking in what Kim just said, and I'm just overwhelmed by, I'm just overwhelmed by your grace in this moment. To be honest, this is it's just amazing to hear you articulate that. My contribution, I think, is personal and professional. I think professionally, I'm really honored to be a part of helping teachers figure out what their role is here, and recognizing, what teachers can do to fight against the racism that our kids have experienced for their whole lives, but also to recognize when they're actually perpetuating some racism in their classroom without even knowing it. So, Courtney and Nkechi both talked about their experiences with just getting bombarded by implicit bias their whole life. I think teachers can perpetuate that without recognizing it. And so to help teachers, both Black and white teachers, kind of realize some of the choices that they make in the classroom and how that may or may not make kids feel and may or may not make kids re-experience trauma, has been, I think, a professional contribution. And it's one that I take really seriously and love working with teachers and helping them think this through. On a personal level, I think being a white person in this moment is so important to think about our whiteness. It's so important to talk about it. It's so important to talk about it with our children. I hear so many of my friends who are, good liberal folks going out to protests, not really having real conversations, not really wanting to recognize their own role in perpetuating some of this stuff that's been happening, wanting to distance themselves from hurting others. And I think it's a moment where we have to be honest with ourselves, honest with each other, and create spaces where we can push each other. I think white parents have to talk to their children about this. We have to, because Black parents don't have that luxury of making that decision. They're forced to have these conversations way too early. And so we are too. Now it's time for us to do the same. So my oldest daughter is 4, and she's been out to every protest. We've had lots of conversations. There's so much nuance that she misses. She saw, Kim, one of the things, it was resonating with me because she saw a police officer on the street at a protest, and she asked me, Mom, is that the cop that killed Breonna Taylor? Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I accidentally making you like generalize this entire group of people? There's so much nuance to it. And of course, our kids are little and they can't understand it all, but it is our responsibility to help them think it through. For so many years, white people have not had these tough conversations, and it's time to lean in, and we have to. We owe it to our fellow humans. And so I feel like that's a contribution for me to push my white friends and colleagues and family members who truly deeply think that they've done the work, but are not quite digging in a way that I think we all need to.
Yeah. Thank you. Ketch, let's jump to you, your contribution, and then Hooker, just pick up afterwards.
Yeah. So I think professionally, one of my most impactful contributions is I started a racial justice task force in my firm. It's made up of about 40 attorneys, and we are just actively looking for opportunities to partner with various nonprofit social justice organizations like the ACLU to partner with them in lawsuits across the country that involve, cases that relate to police brutality, police reform, advocating for voting rights for formerly incarcerated individuals, and representing peaceful protesters who have been wrongfully arrested and charged with felonies, like we saw with the 87 protesters that were sitting on the Kentucky Attorney General's lawn and were charged with felonies. So that is something that I'm proud of, because there are a lot of people that want to help, and they don't know how. On a professional level, I have been, really touched to see the, many non-Black, non-people of color that reach out to me to say, thank you so much for starting this, because I'm a corporate attorney. Like I, deal in mergers and acquisitions every day, but if there's anything I can do to help you in this effort, I would love to extend my help in X, Y, and Z way. And I think a lot of people in big law, get a bad reputation for not caring, which I think maybe some of them don't, but they are also just looking for the right opportunity to lend their expertise. So this task force has been something that, we just started, but I'm hoping to sort of expand to have a meaningful impact on the community. And then to Anna's point, on a personal level, I have been trying to really connect with the non-Black people in my life, and to make them feel like I don't want them to feel like they can't have honest conversations with me, or conversations that are like they shouldn't feel guilty just for being white. I want it to be a productive conversation. I want them to be able to come to me and, so that we can talk through this together. I don't want it to be a me versus them. And so I have been, my husband and I are lucky enough to have a deck outside, a patio, where we have been inviting a couple of friends over every weekend, just to talk, and most of the time we're just sort of shooting the shit. And we get to the point where it sort of pivots, where we, have to make a meaningful effort to discuss, things that are uncomfortable for both of us. But we have made a concerted effort to sort of put ourselves in those uncomfortable situations, because I think really those, one-on-one, those individual connections, like Anna was talking about, sitting and listening to her neighbors on the porch. I think that those are some of the most like meaningful steps that, both Black and white people can take to make sure that this moment really leads to long-lasting, structural change.
Awesome.
Bart?
Yeah, so I also have been really diving deeply in forming anti-racist efforts at Google as well. I talked about this a little bit, but one of my main objectives for this work is not just to improve educational resources for my fellow colleagues, but also I feel like as Google as a company, we need to really inspect our current products and figure out why we've decided to leave Black voices out of the mix. And when we look at the way that products are developed, they're often developed in teams in these silos. And when you look at the makeup of the team, they're mostly white men. And so how do we expect white men to develop products with people of color in mind? Like it doesn't shake out well. And so I've been looking a lot at things like, because I'm in artificial intelligence, looking a lot at skin tone and skin color and colorism in our products, and how we train our models and how we collect data and how we don't get representative data. We're not getting people with darker skin tones. And what does that do? We need to think about fairness, right? And right now our products aren't fair. And so I've been doing a lot of stuff on the product side. And then of course, kind of in the employee side, I am forcing people to not be colorblind. We know colorblindness doesn't work. Anna, I think you brought up some really great points there. Ignoring race is what we've been doing for a really long time. And guess what, guys? It doesn't fucking work. It backfires. It's painful for people when you don't acknowledge that there are people who are treated badly and poorly and unfairly because of race. And I think that large companies are specifically prone to adopting colorblindness because it's easier. And I've decided I don't want to take the easy way out anymore. And so I'm forcing people into quite uncomfortable conversations, but necessary conversations, because that's how change happens. It's not with, some fanfare of epiphany. It's not with just doing things the way they've been doing. it has to start with those difficult conversations. So I'm also having those as well. And then just personally, I've been thinking a lot about kind of food security. So at Google, my main project is focused on agriculture and AI, and how do we use ML, machine learning innovation to help feed the world, and feed people who are in need. And so a lot of my work has now pivoted to focus on a different set of users from underserved communities, especially given the COVID crisis. How do we sort of leverage that technology to get people to the right resources at the right time? And so that's been really rewarding. And personally in my life, I also just like am a sounding board for people too. Like Nkechi said, I invite people into those conversations. I think, like I mentioned before, you know, people should do the work. Like, it shouldn't just be me educating you. I think that everybody needs to learn about systemic racism and inequality, not just as a result of this protest, but there is a long history that a lot of people don't understand. And so, you know, I'm really excited to have those conversations, and I have been also just facilitating those, and also just, you know, there's not enough brown people in tech, and so I am now kind of like mentoring like all of the few brown people in my org, which is it's frustrating to see so few, but you know, trying to figure out how we get more in, because we know that diversity makes for better leaderships, makes for better organizations, better conversations. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you. We're a little over time, but I do want to get to a question because it came up in some aspect, you know, from several people in the Q&A. Defunding the police. Kim, you are a police officer. What does this mean to you? How do you think this sort of thing impacts your work? You know, you've alluded already a little bit to what your day-to-day looks like. And I think some people who are following this movement might say, well, there are a lot of opportunities to reshuffle, reorganize funding, change policies and practices. And so tell us, like, what do you think of defunding the police as a movement and a push towards policy change?
Sure. So in general, I mean, at least in Oakland, I think defunding the police would hurt the vulnerable. At large, you've got to consider public safety. Crime won't go away simply because the police do, right? And I think to think this way is somewhat reckless. So in the wake of George Floyd's murder, there was a Defund the Oakland Police Department campaign that started. And through this, there was a lot of conversation and some good ideas that really came to light. So, for example, like transferring responsibility of fireworks to the Oakland Fire Department. I think that's a positive. Sending mental health counselors to 911 calls for mental health crisis issues. I think that's excellent. And then even having, or I should say not having, like Oakland police respond to homeless encampment issues. Those are three things, you know, that I think it would behoove everyone to take off of our plate. As officers, we're kind of, or as a police department even, and it's not just Oakland, but all police departments, we're kind of a catch-all, if you will. When someone has a problem, it's natural to call 911 for help. We're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But not all of those calls are best suited for officers to handle. Sure, we get training in all these different areas, but mental health crisis calls, I think it would be beneficial to have, you know, a counselor and expert that deals with those types of issues, you know, handle those types of calls. So I think there's some good, certainly, that can be we've already lost $14.6 million. But there's conversation to have a lot more taken away from our department. And that conversation is supposed to be had next week, I think on the 21st. It goes before City Council. But you have to remember that defunding the department really would disproportionately impact not only the poor, but the vulnerable, working people, and small businesses. A decade ago, when the council reduced the police force, and it was by like 80 officers, the impact on crime was dramatic. In years following the layoffs, Oakland's crime rate increased by about 30%. During that time, statewide numbers actually decreased, but Oakland's increased by a substantial number, again, 30%. So it took nearly 5 years and an economic boom for Oakland to really recover and reduce the crime back to pre-level layoffs. And one thing that should be noted is that 30% crime increase wasn't spread across the city. Residents in the more affluent hill areas, they combated crime with hiring private security and so forth. But it's the residents that are in the flatlands, that are in the east and west neighborhoods, they're going to be suffering the most. They're the ones that are actually experiencing the murders, the shootings, and with the cutbacks, OPD is not able to respond to those types of calls, kind of where they need it the most. So right now, just to give everyone a bit of an understanding of, statistics in Oakland, right now, Oakland faces enormous demands for police service. Last year in 2019, OPD had 48,647 calls for help. It's unbelievable. That works out to about 2,000 calls per day. And so at any given moment, there's 100 calls awaiting, a police officer to respond to. And it's just astronomical. Even during the Corona pandemic, while other cities have seen a reduction in violent crimes, Oakland has actually seen an increase since the shelter in place. Oakland had 236 shootings and homicides, which is a 24% increase year over year. So additional funding, or defunding rather, would only endanger the lives of Oakland's most vulnerable and citizens, and further impact the response time, to community members. I think it's going to hurt us. We need more officers, if anything, but this is just my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. I do want someone to respond to that, but because of time, we're going to actually shift a little bit. But I think that was important to say, because I think a lot of us, especially coming from a very socially liberal place like Cal, have maybe had more exposure to, what opportunities there are to change police departments. So I appreciate you. God, Maite. It's time, I can't. But if anyone wants to ask the panel a question live, Jenny and I are gonna unveil everyone who has hung around, and we're gonna open it up for folks who want to ask. They can raise their hand if you go to your participant little thing at the bottom and then click the hand raise. Then you can go ahead and ask a question to the panel.
Jarbo, I think
Jenny's
I deactivated that feature, so I don't think they can
Jenny
raise their hand.
deactivated that.
Yeah, but can I just say one thing before we pivot to letting everyone in, which is I just want to thank Jarbo and all four of you for both your openness and your collaboration. I think all of us have sat in on a number of conversations about this topic recently, and to me, none has been as open and collaborative as the one here today, and that's a testament to all of you. So I hope, I wish I could come hang out on your porch, Ketch, but we'll have to keep, versions of this going. There's been 25 people here the whole time, and I want you to see everybody's faces. So Jarbo and I are gonna flip the switch so people can come on in, but feel free to keep chatting amongst yourselves.
How do I flip the switch? Jenny's gonna flip the switch for everybody.
Okay, that's
There
fine.
we go. Yay! We got it.
Let's see everyone.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. JT, are you still here, JT? Yeah. JT JT has a question that I want to unmute her so she can ask when she pops up on my screen. Hold
I'm
on.
bringing her in. Hold on.
Okay, cool. Oh, allowed to talk. All right, I think you can talk, JT. Wait, where'd you
Seems
go?
as though she can't.
Oh, okay. Well, oh, here she is. Oh my God. JT, talk. You're unmuted.
Okay.
Oh, you can see me? Okay, I'm talking.
No, no
First
one can
off,
see you. No one can
thank
see you.
you.
No one can see you.
No one can see me.
But we can hear you.
Okay.
Yay.
Hi, Bears.
Hey,
First off, I'm verklempt. I'm so proud of all of you. I'm like tearing up and yelling and having all sorts of emotions here by myself in my house, which is awesome. But I just wanted to go back a little bit and ask my question, which was like, how did you feel being a woman of color as a Cal student athlete? And it's just, I kind of want to take us back because I mean, it's personal. I want to know because I want to know how to help all these students I'm working with right now. And B, I want to know how you guys really felt at Cal.
I can start. No, I'm just kidding.
The white person
am.
wants to speak. Hooker, I feel like you and I have talked about this a lot. I'd love for you to chime in and kick it off.
So the words, right? I think this is a really good question and it's a really hard question. On the field, I felt the most closely connected to the Bears, the community. I never felt more welcomed, more loved, and more just like happy to be there and part of that community. Outside of that and in the classroom, I did not feel that way at all. I think that there were many experiences that I had where when I was trying to do, for example, the double major in psychology and biology, which granted was like very ambitious. I remember teachers telling me like, you're an athlete, don't do that. And so this obviously has to do with, and many of us have probably had this, but also I've had comments of like, well, you don't belong in that classroom, like you should take this course, you should take African American studies, like what are you doing? And so while there was so much diversity and love and joy and happiness happening on our team, I felt that those experiences made me really question my legitimacy in the classroom and my value. And so, yeah, I think it was hard. But I will say that it's a privilege to be able to be a student athlete at Cal, and especially on the soccer team. I just wish that we had more diversity in the school itself. I felt like sometimes, and this is just being totally candid, like all of the athletes are Black, but there were no other non-Black athletes. Like, where are the Black people? Where are the Black people at? And in order to have that community, you had to be a part of the athletic community. I could not imagine being a Black student who wasn't part of that community. Because even in my own experiences, I found myself feeling kind of isolated. So yeah, a mixed bag, but yeah.
Emmer Catch.
Okay, I'll start. Yeah, I think also a mixed bag. I was, I think, fortunate enough to have, Jarbo and Courtney be directly above me. And so it was, I was lucky to have those two women as, mentors and people that I looked up to. I think, the from the coaches to my fellow teammates, I definitely felt like I was supported and accepted. Sure, I can think of a handful of questionable comments that were made by fellow teammates that I don't think that they were trying to be malicious, but just some things that I think back now on that I'm like, okay, that was a bit ignorant. But we're all, we were young, we were learning, we were experiencing things together. Outside of, I think, the soccer team, I experienced I think I didn't know where I fit in. I was doing a lot of code switching where when I was around other Black athletes, I was like, okay, like I need to be more Black because I want, I play soccer, but I'm still Black, and I want the track girls and the basketball girls. Like I want to be accepted by them. And I really wasn't. And I think for me, that was actually the hardest thing about Cal, was how my Blackness was constantly questioned because of how I talked. I grew up in Pleasanton. I, dated some questionable men that were.
Girl. Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Woo! I mean, God really saw me through that one. But it was those 4 years. It was. I mean, I was experiencing a lot. It was an amazing experience, and I never felt. I don't know. When I was playing soccer and around, the team, I felt very accepted and supported. But to Hooker's point, when I was, wearing my Cal Soccer large white shirt in classes, I felt like being athlete and being Black and being a female were things that made me stick out in a bad way in the classroom. And then socially, I was, again, struggling to try and prove to people that I was, I was really Black. And then over here, I'm trying to prove, no, I am really smart. And so there was a lot going on, but I still had an amazing time being part of the Cal Soccer women's team.
Kim?
Just like the other ladies, I felt supported, certainly by the soccer team. I grew up in Berkeley, so came from a liberal background and family. And I didn't really have any issues. One thing I was surprised about is, the makeup. I think, as Courtney mentioned, once I got to Cal, I picked Cal because I thought it was going to be, extremely diverse and kind of a makeup of the community, the Berkeley community, or even Oakland. And I was really looking forward to that. But like Courtney alluded to, outside of the sports community, you really didn't find that, or I didn't. And so I thought that was interesting. But overall, I felt, supported and, like Ketchy mentioned, maybe a handful of questionable, comments, but never, never like purposely said. I think just, we're, like you said, we're growing up, we're learning, but overall good experience.
Thank you. I'm going to close it out, but I'm going to answer this question because I'm a woman of color who's a student athlete. I'm not going to re-say what anybody else said because honestly, like verbatim, that's how I felt. So there's no need to say the same thing. So I think there's a lot we can learn from the iteration of, like, the reiteration of that in itself, right? Because the experiences are actually really common regardless of what kind of people of color you are. What I will say, I think, to answer your question, JT, because I know you work with youth and you're in coaching, and I know there are a lot of coaches here. I think what's important also to understand, or start to begin to understand, is that when we're talking about racism, we're fundamentally talking about like the subjugation or the taking of power away from people who are Black. That's what we're talking about, right? And so we have to just sort of understand that this is fundamentally about power. And so as a coach, as a teacher, working with youth of color or working with low income youth or youth who are queer or have disabilities, doesn't matter. I think we should always find ways to re-engage their power and empower them, even if it doesn't look familiar to us, right? And I think that what Ketchy, Kim, and Courtney talked about in some ways without these words are, there are lots of instances at a place like Cal where our power was taken away. Maybe because we were Black, maybe not. We can never actually answer that question. But I think what's important to think about as we bring youth up in the world and continue to coach or be involved with people from different backgrounds is that we remember that some of us in this life are born inherently because of society's structures with more power. And the way you keep that power is actually only by taking it away from others. And so I think it's wise for all of us to think about the ways in which we take power away from others, because we all do it. I subjugate Black people all the time. I don't mean to. And I think that's important to say. And so anyways, to sort of wrap that up from my perspective, I mean, there were many instances in which I felt really powerless at a place like Cal. Not just because of my race, but because of lots of other things. And I think it would serve us all really well to think about the moments and times in which someone who's not like us could be powerless. Is someone saying a joke about them? Am I laughing along? Am I stepping up, etc., right? So I think that's what I challenge myself with every day. Am I contributing to subjugating another person? Doesn't matter why. If they perceive it as because of their race or because of something else, then the harm's already done. Intentions can be good, but impact is something that we should think about a lot. I don't know if that answers your question, JT, if that was helpful for you. I love how your like beer got really big and then it got super small. Jenny, since you planned all of this, if you're still here, I don't see you anymore. Oh yeah, there you are. I would love for you to close this out, but before I kick it off to you, thank you panelists for saying yes to me when I asked you and reading my emails with all the bullet points and sharing an experience, because I think a lot of us have intimated, regardless of our race on the panel, that a lot of this is really lonely. Just like being in your own head at this time, being in your own heart at this time is super lonely. So thank you for sharing and being willing to put it all out there.
And on that note, I think, you know, the loneliness was one of the reasons why we set up this series, right, was to connect. So if anybody wants to unmute and hang out just for 10 minutes or so and say hi to each other. I can't believe Bree and Sierra are together, and Kat and Tori. You guys are making me so proud right now. We have our little cohorts. So just thanks to everybody who participated. And Anna, if you want to go make sure your kids are alive, that'd probably be a good idea. But thanks. I know it's late on the East Coast, so.
Love you guys.
So much. Thank you for putting this together, Jarbo and Jenny. You guys are amazing. It's been an incredible experience. I'm so humbled to be part of it. I missed bedtime, so I do have to go, but I love you all so much.
Sorry,
Thanks for being here, y'all.
Wait, is it too late? Respond to defund the police. Go.
Wait.
Also, JT, cheers.
Wait, what was that?
Cheers. Thank you. And Ben's. And my tay. Happy cocktail hour, all you bears. Hey, and don't forget to show up next week for our Bears on the Front Line in Healthcare. That should be crazy like this one too. And then we'll end with soccer, which will probably be gentle.
And
Tracy's involved. Will it be gentle?
Hooker and Ketch, and I'll tell Anna too. There was some requests for getting those book recommendations in writing. So if you have a chance, if you guys can send them to me, I will blast them to the group. Yeah.
Okay. I have a couple more to add to the list, so I will do that.
Catch, do you want to email me first and then I'll send it all to Jenny?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Hey, Kim Brown. Hey, everybody. It's so great to see everybody, even though I don't know everybody. I love being part of this every week. But Kim Brown, wow, I love you so much. Thank you for what you're doing, and it's so, so good to see your face.
Likewise. I miss you, and I'll see you guys soon.
Oh, you're awesome.
For sure. Thanks, Kat.
You bet.
All right, well, it was so great to see all of your faces. Sorry, I probably talked too much, but I like to talk.
Never.
I can listen to you guys for hours.
Do you remember when you missed the bus your first day of training came out and you were just a hot mess? And look at you now.
Oh, no. I can. She didn't miss the bus. She missed the BART train in the wrong direction to Richmond and couldn't get back. She was under house arrest in Pleasanton. I know the whole story.
Anyone could have made that mistake. It was confusing.
I wrote.
And that's what you have.
I've got stories on YouTube. Don't even start, Hooker.
I love
Hooker
her.
and Raelia. Did Raelia already leave?
Even
No,
Jarbo.
she's there. Do you guys
Why am I
remember
getting
that
called
first
out?
game against North Carolina at YouTube center backs? That was the best moment ever.
Wait, we lost.
Wait, what happened?
Yeah, what?
Yeah, what are you talking about? We lost.
Keep talking in details on this game. Nobody remembers what you're talking about.
Oh,
I do.
Oh, you want to hear, Hooker? Okay. So we've never been scored on like that in one half ever. And instead of listening to the halftime talk, you went to your backpack, got on your phone, and called your mother in the locker room at halftime.
She gives the best pep talk.
I was
She gave a better pep talk than Kevin Boyd ever did.
yeah, clearly.
I love a frozen
Raelia,
drink.
your best move. Sorry. Raelia, your best move was University of Oregon.
Yeah.
First of all, she punched me in the stomach. Okay? If you're gonna fight me, I'm gonna fight you back. So don't start
She picked
fighting.
the wrong girl.
The best thing was we had our screw-ins for that game, so you had like the metal spikes in your hand when you went after.
Oh my God, y'all. I gotta go to dinner with my sister, but I love you all. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Being part of, letting me be a part of this.
Bye, everyone. I'm out too. I see Sarah.
Bye, Kimmy.
Oh my
Bye,
God.
guys. Love
I
you
tried
guys.
to hunt down Petey, couldn't find her.
Oh, that would have been, I haven't seen her in years.
Oh, well, she's wrangling 4 children that are almost all adults now and running a farm out in what's not farm country in Danville. So.
Danville. Okay. Oh, you'll have to tell her I say hi and some
I
my
will
love.
for sure. Yeah.
Great seeing you, Les.
Kim Brown, you were like the best thing ever. I miss you so much.
I miss you too. So great to see you.
Maite, in the like pre-party, I was like, Kim, I don't think we've met. Have you been to any events? And she's like, no, I haven't been around in a while, but she's happy to be back. And it was just so nice to chat with her. Yeah.
You guys were missing out when she wasn't here.
Yeah.
Kim, I love you. You stay safe, okay?
Love you too. Take care.
I miss you guys.
Bye.
Take care.
I feel like this is like Survivor.
I know, right?
Who's gonna stay last?
Wait, where are you two? Whose house are you at?
My house. Cat lives here.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's a house in the back, a little studio in the back, and I got it.
Oh, love it. They're not far. They're in Berkeley. Yeah.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
She's in Concord now.
Concord. So I moved out of Oakland about a year ago, and I'm in the Clayton Concord area, so not far. Not far.
Okay, I'm gonna go tend to my husband and my dog. Love you guys.
You guys take care.
Bye.